Britain, the present and the past often exist side by side. We like to feel that there is a continuity about our way of life from one generation to the next. This tower of Magdalen College in Oxford was built in the year Columbus sailed to America. The undergraduates who pass beneath it are part of an ancient institution which remains completely in touch with life today. So too, the blue-coat boy at Christ's Hospital receives an education fitted to the modern world, although he wears the uniform and observes the traditions of earlier times. But older than our schools or our most ancient universities is the institution of the monarchy. The proclamation of the accession of our kings and queens follows a form laid down by long tradition.
The crown is solely and rightfully come to the high and mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
Tradition dictates the form of the coronation ceremony. In this consecration of a sovereign, the customs of another age are seen to clothe beliefs that we still value. The orb is a symbol of the worldwide nature of the Christian faith. The scepter with the cross, symbol of regal power. The scepter with the dove signifies equity and mercy. This long and splendid ritual leading up to the supreme act of coronation derives its immense authority from its survival through 1,000 years and more.
Set the crown your gold on his head, so enrich his royal heart with thine abundant grace, and crown him with all princely virtues through the King eternal, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Only the Pope can look back on a longer line of predecessors than the British sovereign. Queen Elizabeth II is the latest of a long line which we can follow back through 1,100 years of development and change, through the houses of Windsor and Hanover, the Stuarts, the Tudors, the kings of York and Lancaster and Plantagenet, beyond the time of portraits and even of bronze likenesses, to the house of Alfred, and so to Egbert, King of all England in 829. Thus, the line of English kings was established 400 years before the time of Edward I and the summoning in 1295 of the model parliament. From this time, the history of the monarchy is linked with that of parliament. But in the middle of the period of the Stuart kings comes a violent break. As we turn the pages of history, the angry tones of the great quarrel between king and parliament come back to us. The ungainly James I claimed divine authority for his rule.
As to dispute what God may do is blasphemy. So it is sedition in subjects to dispute what a king may do in the height of his power. You derive all matters of privilege from me, and sit not of your own right, but of my grace.
Parliament stoutly resisted this view.
The liberties, franchises, privileges, and jurisdictions of Parliament are the ancient, undoubted birthright and inheritance of the subjects of England.
The next king, Charles I, met even stronger opposition from Puritan squires like John Hampden or their great leader John Pym, whose speeches in the House of Commons came near to accusing the king himself of plot against the Parliament.
The honor of the king lies in the safety of the people, and we must tell the truth. The plots have been very near the king, all brought home to the court and the popish party.
The quarrel became desperate. Pym and his friends had to take flight, as Charles came in person to the House of Commons to arrest them.
Yesterday I sent a sergeant-at-arms to apprehend some that by my command were accused of high treason, whereunto I did expect obedience and not a message. Is Mr. Pym here? Are any of these persons here?
Now all hope of peace was gone. At Nottingham, Charles raised his standard and England plunged into civil war. A bitter war which ended with the trial of the king.
What sentence the law affirms to a traitor, a tyrant, a murderer, and a public enemy, that sentence you are now to hear read unto you, and that is the sentence of the court.
Death was the sentence upon the scaffold in Whitehall. Cromwell the soldier came to rule the new republic and was forced to sweep away the old Parliament.
It is not fit that you sit as a Parliament any longer. You have sat too long here for any good you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go.
But after Cromwell's death, men tired of government by soldiers. General Monk, most powerful of the army's leaders, declared for a free Parliament, and the new king, Charles II, came back from Holland. For without a king, it seemed, Parliament could not function. Charles II realized his powers were limited, but his brother James II had not learnt this lesson, and a new crisis arose. James was forced to flee the country in the bloodless revolution of 1688. But the monarchy itself was preserved. A new king, William III, came across the water and landed in Torbay. William and Mary accepted a crown limited in its powers by the Declaration of Rights. The king's part in government was changed, and the power of Parliament assured. Under great statesmen like Robert Walpole, a new system grew up. The king's ministers became responsible to Parliament for their actions, and William Pitt became the first modern Prime Minister under these new conditions. When Victoria opened the first of her many parliaments, the monarchy entered on a new period of stability and growing prestige. Today, when our Queen drives to open Parliament, she represents the latest stage in the development of what is called constitutional monarchy. Her speech from the throne announces the policy prepared by her ministers, especially by the Prime Minister, who must defend this policy before Parliament. The same who gather on such occasions to show their loyalty and affection to the Crown are free to elect the members of Parliament at a general election. They can vote freely for candidates from different parties or of no party at all who wish to represent them in Parliament. At such times, even the greatest of public men are seen moving about the streets, enlisting the support of the humblest citizen. Everything to do with an election, as carried out in Britain, is directed to making sure that the will of the people shall be truly expressed. Excitement grows as the results begin to come through, for the party with the greatest number of members in Parliament will produce the leaders who form the government of the day. They will be responsible in Parliament to the elected representatives of the people. These party leaders become the Queen's ministers in charge of the great government departments in Whitehall. The Admiralty, the Home Office, the Foreign Office, and so on. Nearby is Downing Street, where the Prime Minister himself lives and works at number 10. In this room, the Cabinet Ministers meet for conferences. Beneath the portrait of Sir Robert Walpole, the first Prime Minister whose house this was, the Prime Minister of today sits here as chairman. He bears the responsibility and criticism for acts of government which used to be borne by the sovereign. Senior ministers may often be seen arriving for these conferences. Together they form the Cabinet, which lays down the policy of the government under the leadership of the Prime Minister. Messengers carrying red dispatch boxes may sometimes be seen in Whitehall. This smart little brougham is one of the more picturesque of the many means by which these boxes are carried to and fro between Whitehall and Buckingham Palace, bearing the unending stream of papers by which the Queen is kept in touch with the thoughts and actions of her government. There is, too, a succession of official visitors of whom the public sees little. Occasionally, one may catch sight of an ambassador arriving in a state landau to present his credentials. But we must imagine for ourselves his ascent of the grand staircase and his reception by the sovereign in the throne room. In these magnificent surroundings, the patient, exacting, unseen side of the sovereign's work goes on. It is the Queen's constant duty to advise and criticize, as well as approving the actions of her government. So there are papers to be read, audiences to be given to ministers and others, privy councils to be held. These councils take place here in the 1844 room. The Queen enters through the small doorway in the corner and seats herself at the round table in the center. Then the doors from the great reception room beyond are thrown open and the privy councillors enter and stand to one side of the table. In front of them is the stool upon which new privy councillors kneel to be sworn in. But usually it is only at a time of great crisis, such as in 1939, that the public sees something of this side of the activities of the Crown. When war broke out, King George VI went immediately to the ministers of the armed services to see for himself the action being taken. He called upon his Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street, thus emphasizing the close link which exists between King and Prime Minister in the British system. During the war, King George was in close touch with every action of government, conferring with members of the Cabinet and Chiefs of Staff, and especially with the Prime Minister. But even wars come to an end and Prime Ministers change. Yet each one, while he bears the full responsibility of government, pays due regard to the advice and experience of the sovereign, who alone remains always in office. The other great function of the monarchy is more easily seen. Even before the late King's death, Princess Elizabeth carried out important public and ceremonial duties. Now, as sovereign, the weight of those duties increases. In her, the national loyalty is focused into a personal loyalty. good times and in bad, the Queen represents the nation, as no Prime Minister can. Since the monarchy was raised above politics, it has grown closer to the people. This is true not only at home, but in the great dominions overseas, between whom the Crown is now the only legal link. In Canada, the Princess, as she then was, received the devotion due to the future Queen of Canada. Just as in South Africa in 1947, the late King and his Queen were received as sovereigns of that country by Europeans and by Africans alike. It was there that Princess Elizabeth came of age and made her vow of service to the peoples of the Commonwealth.
I declare before you all, with my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Now, as Queen, she inherits the great traditions of constitutional monarchy built up by her father and grandfather. Like them, she enjoys, when state affairs permit, a happy family life. And this, like so much else, is symbolic of her position at the head of the great family of the British Commonwealth and Empire. Spread all across the world, with many differences of race and color and custom, with the Crown as the golden link between them all.